And the more they do that, I don't see them doing that, because the more they do that, the more we're not going to believe them, right?
Yeah, you're right.
So
That's what would happen. Oh, they're going to say the Weaver report was BS, and then they're not going to want to do it because they're going to say, "Well, maybe you're BS." I mean, where does the BS stop? That's what we're talking about
I
here.
mean, they're better off looking negligent and stupid, saying, well, at the level of our understanding, we did an investigation, and that's what we came to. We now know more about the world than we do before, and now we reach a different result. That's
But
the answer you're going to get.
yeah, but again, going back to my training as a statistician, you can
Right.
err too much in being too gullible and believing results that aren't statistically significant, that you can show are spurious. The other danger is if you discard too much data, you end up committing what we call a type 2 error in statistics, which I'm sure you're familiar with, Steve, at an intuitive level. It's where something is really going on and you're not paying attention. You're blind to new data. That's the type 2 error. The type 1 error is you're too gullible. You're believing a study that was just random or spurious results. The other side of the dial is something's really going on and you're not paying attention and the temperature is rising and you're not getting out of the pot quick enough as the water boils. So if we keep pushing it away and we say we want to just be dumb about this and it's going to make the government look bad, the fact that we were negligent this whole time, we were deliberately misleading people and abusing the witnesses and threatening people. If you want to ignore that side and just let it go away, you're ignoring what the Spielberg Disclosure Day movie is saying
Right.
at some level, is that in people around the world, some experience is building up and they might start communicating with each other in a new way that could lead to the rise of new structures and institutions spontaneously, the way nature likes to communicate and spontaneous build self-organizing systems and fractals and the other stuff that I've been studying over the years. That nature, going back to another Spielberg movie, Jurassic Park, if I'm not mistaken, what was it? The scientist character says nature finds a way.
Nature
Remember that,
finds a
Jeff
way.
Goldblum?
It's like water moves to its, he was a lawyer, by
Water
the way, and
moves.
it's to
If
its
you've ever
lowest
had,
point. It
if
goes
you've
where
ever
it
camped
wants.
in the wet, you find water finds a way. I learned this as a teenager camping out. Water finds a way to get in your tent. Okay. It comes from above. If you block it from above, it can soak through below. And that's what I'm saying is going on here. You got to do something. You can't just deny it forever because on the other side, the water level is beginning to slowly rise. And as a remote viewing teacher for 30 years, I can tell you people are evolving. It's easier to teach remote viewing than it was 30 years ago. I don't know
Oh,
why
yeah.
that's true. There's some sort of effect, 100th monkey, take your pick what that is. But people are changing slowly.
100th monkey.
100th monkey syndrome. That famous fable. I don't even know if it's true. There was this story we've been told. Maybe it really is. Someone could check that there was this island in Japan, and then some of the monkeys started washing their potatoes in the water. One did one day, and it started to spread throughout that particular group. But then monkeys on other islands started to do it too. This could be fictional, but it was the idea that there's a morphological effect of change, of social change that affects.
There's no question. All you have to do is
Yeah,
look at fashion, right? Donna Karen creates a black dress. All of a sudden,
thank you.
everybody's wearing black dresses. And
Exactly.
everybody else is doing colored stuff. I was a buyer at Nordstrom during that time. Everyone else is doing colored stuff, and they're all out of business. She's making a killing.
I couldn't have said it better.
So, I mean, those kind of things
I rest
happen.
my case here.
I think there's something else that these science fiction movies teach us, and that it kind of explains why they're not telling us anything. They're telling us that the military is going to overreact and cause a disaster with these aliens. There's going to be no level-headed communication. They're going to come in, the general's going to come in, you got, what's his name, who was head of the Air Force under Kennedy. Why can't I think his name? I talk about him all the time. He ran for vice president. Anyway, and come in and say, we can wipe these guys out. Let's just get rid of. They're coming here to kill us all. I mean, we don't know what anybody wants. I mean, first of all, if they have that kind of technology, it's not a big thing to kill us all, right? They have no need. There's nothing to gain here. We've already screwed up the planet enough. There's no resources. There's nothing really to get other than, you know, other than they bring us a cookbook. I mean, there's nothing really to really do. So, you know, it's those scenarios that we've been taught through science fiction movies, really don't work other than to feed fear and do whatever. But
We
go
don't
ahead.
know how, here's the scenario that I think is somewhat plausible, is that the extraterrestrials are already here in some way and we're not seeing them.
Oh,
I've
I think that's
often,
absolutely true. I don't
yeah,
know
I
why,
I
but I
suspect, Steve, if you had to think of one reason why the government wouldn't want to talk about it, it would be total complete, to avoid a situation of total panic. If someone could come to us who knew something and they would say, "Look, guys, here's what's going on. This is why we can't talk about it." The one reason you could really think is instantaneous total panic. And the scenario that I can imagine that might lead to that is some evidence that they're already here in some way and have been around us and we haven't been paying attention or we didn't realize. Like, it could be like a type of plant out there or a tree that just looked like all the other trees. And I'm not saying this is true and I don't want to scare anybody, but Steve, don't you have to agree? Wouldn't that be one scenario where you could say, okay, I can see some justification to slow it down a little bit, because it would be so shocking that people would they wouldn't work. They wouldn't be coming out of their houses the next day. That's the scenario you want to avoid. I mean, I
I
think
I agree. I agree with you that if that's possible and that got out there would be a big thing. But remember when the Moors invaded Spain, the Spanish Catholics started serving pork all the time so they could tell the the Muslims from the Catholics or Christians.
right.
And so they were Catholics at that time. So, I mean, you think about that kind of way of society protecting itself from a changing force. And believe me, the Moors were just as much aliens as somebody coming down from the planet.
That is exactly right. Remember when the Spaniards invaded Mexico, what's now
Right.
Mexico, Central America? And wasn't it, it was Cortez and
Yeah.
Montezuma, and they thought that the horses and
The people were one thing.
yeah, so this has happened before, and Cortez was able to conquer that. How many was it? Millions of people, just through that
Millions and millions of people they
fear
killed.
of not realizing it was a horse and a person and they were mortal, and you could have defeated them just by charging them all at once with the number of people they had. So yeah, these sort of scenarios have happened in our history. That's all the more reason, in my view, to let's get on with what we're dealing with here. There are plenty of people on the ground now that could give intelligent lectures about the subject, and it wouldn't turn into mass panic. But really, the chips are going to fall where they fall, Steve. People like me and you and other researchers, we can only do what we do and have our broadcast. We can't make people listen to it and watch or agree or even say it's real. So you put out the best information you can with what we know. Now, I have to say, James Lukatsky, who's been on a couple podcasts recently, Corbell and Knapp podcast and so forth, who worked at OSAP. He worked in Defense Warning Office for Department of Defense. OSAP program preceded ATIP. They investigated the Nimitz 2004 sightings. They were a UFO research program started by Senator Harry Reid from Nevada. And Lukatsky said it was disguised to look like some sort of foreign technology research program. But he said it's a UFO program. Let's be honest what it was.
Wow.
UFO sightings are more than UFO sightings. This is what he said repeatedly on these podcasts. There's more going on, and we don't totally understand it. The government. And he said, and you don't have to believe him, but he said, even if you found the person in the government that knew the most about this topic, Steve, that's only 5% of it. 5% is more than nothing, but it's a big universe, and there's a lot of different types of intelligences out there with their own agendas and ideas, and we don't even understand the vast majority of what their motivations are to be here, what they're doing, but we understand a little bit. And so if that's true, this is something that has to proceed in a orderly, slower way because
Cautiously,
yeah, because I would say at this
not
point,
clandestinely, but cautiously.
right. Very good point. I like that phrase. We need to get moving on it. Not in a huge way all at once, we need to start some intelligent research at the public level, not just secret special access program, cautiously, like you're saying, to get some understanding. We have the internet now. We have a lot of researchers out there that can give intelligent lectures about the subject, and we need to start for our own benefit, just to be adults, because we've moved on from addition and subtraction, like you were saying at the beginning of the show, to multiplication and division. We need to move to multiplication and division now. Because if we just keep holding it back at this point, people are going to distrust the government more and more, and the system will lose functionality over the years. So we need, for the sake of the system's integrity, to move forward on the topic 0.1% at a time. I'm fine with the 10. If all they know is 5%, I'm fine with 0.1% per year. Over a decade, we'd catch up. That's what we got to do, in my view.
I'm going to throw something out there that I may edit out, but it's just something I thought about. I mean, when I'm a logical thinker, I don't always, I don't know, I'm not always right, but I like to find when something doesn't make sense, I can't let go of it. And something that hasn't made sense to me is that there's been these mass migrations all around the world from impoverished people to more wealthier nations. You have people moving from the Middle East into France. You have people coming from Mexico into the United States, and certain groups of people are letting it happen. And there's a lot of people that say, no, don't let this happen. It's going to screw up our whole country. Well, what do we know about where those people come from? That there's always been that their ancient cultures have interacted with aliens.
Right.
So could it be that this is a way that these alien earthlings, so they're either mixed generation or parts of theirs, are able to spread throughout the world?
Wow. You got me on that one. I never even thought
I
about it
mean, that's the craziest thing I've ever thought of.
okay. That, Steve, you're bringing up a whole nother aspect of this cookbook here, because what you're talking about is hybridization, a
Well,
slow
I
hybridization
mean, if you
of
think about it, if you have these aliens they're all in the South America, and North
yeah,
America doesn't have aliens, right? Or doesn't have these co-mingled people, right? So it's going to be, we need to destroy them. It's the other side. We're not letting them in. But if they're all over, there's nothing you can do.
right. Well, look, Steve, I mean, I
How's
can't.
that? How's that for a scary thought? Did I
Yeah,
just blow your mind? Because you're a hard guy to blow their mind to.
yeah. No, I had never thought about that, but it
Because
does
all
remind.
those ancient civilizations have all thought,
They do.
had interacted with aliens. That's the spin out there. The hieroglyphics with spaceships and all those things. And maybe they've been here. I mean, maybe they've been here that long,
Well,
whoever it
Steve, you're
is.
raising a bigger story that we haven't even started to talk about, which is, to what extent have we been influenced genetically by another species without our being aware of it? Some sort of intentional genetic modification. I mean, some people suspect that we're a modified hominid. I mean, and this is for another day, but that's why would Bigfoot look so different than us, but so similar? Is this we're some sort of modification? Going back on the family tree of hominids, it just raises a lot of questions. But you know what you raised in my mind is, why did the White House get the website aliens.gov? Because no one's sure what they're doing with that. Is it a website about illegal immigration, or is it something to do with this? I mean, at some point, the discussion of aliens begins to merge into one discussion if what you're saying has some validity to it.
I'm not saying it does,
We don't know, but
but
it's certainly a
but
hypothetical.
imagine, but I mean, we've certainly in the last decade have scratched their heads why we opened the borders and let all these people in that had no money, no anything. And you know what? I say to myself that I don't buy it. I don't buy it because we want to give them a better life. I don't buy that anybody cares about that. There's always, what do we know? There's always a reason. There's always a reason why human beings do certain things. And that reason has eluded me for such a long time. I don't know what to say. I'm gonna have to. Part of me says I'm gonna cut this whole part out and save it for another day. But it just happened to come to my mind then, and I said it out loud.
You got me on that scenario there. But the larger question I think that you're raising is, this is the bigger picture, Steve. Does humanity have a role to play in this cosmic community that we could be part of? And that there's just a huge story ahead of us that we don't even have an inkling of, in terms of our relations with these other intelligences. A lot of them are, as Dave Grush said, corporeal, bipedal. Is there Is that another reason for not talking about it? Is there some sort of, okay, so the second reason, first reason was they're already here and they're part of something, they've been around you and you weren't aware of it. The second reason is genetics, hybridization, interbreeding, all these touchy, difficult to talk about subjects. What's the reality of that? Because you were asking me about UFO conferences, contact in the desert. There are a lot of people I've met over the years who feel that they've been abducted and
True.
taken on ships, and that sometimes reproductive materials are tested or extracted, right? It's kind of a messy subject to talk about. But I will tell you something that Terry Lovelace told me to repeat. Terry Lovelace being that guy that wrote the book Incident at Devil's Den, about being taken aboard a triangular craft while taking a break from the Air Force for a weekend in Devil's Den State Park in Arkansas. Someone I've talked to, by the way, a former federal prosecutor
Wow.
for the South Pacific Territories. Federal prosecutor, came out of the Air Force, went into law, became a federal prosecutor. And he had an experience with a guy he called Toby, where they were taken aboard a craft. They got burns. They felt injured. They didn't talk about it, but the Air Force somehow found out about it. They thought maybe because they left all their camping gear and just split in the middle of the night. And they attempted hypnosis. Same thing like I mentioned with Gary, hypnosis. What did you see? You know, so Terry told me, and he authorized me to repeat this, he got a call from Department of Homeland Security in New York City a couple of years ago. And he said they wanted to know every detail about his abduction experience. Like they knew about this, Steve. And
Right.
when he got done telling the story, they could have read the book. And Terry had his own podcast for a while. He, by the way, he came out with a second book called Incident at Devil's Den, the uh, Revelation or something. It was a second book where just witnesses who had written into him, he shared their stories. And it's a very compelling collection of stories just from people he's interacted with since the first book. He said DHS said to him when he finished telling his story, "We're treating this like a criminal activity." You can read into that what you
Interesting.
will. And Terry said to them, if I'm not mistaken, "I didn't know the U.S. government had jurisdiction over extraterrestrials." right? It's a big issue, as you know, in law. What's the jurisdiction here? And he said there was silence on the other end. No one laughed. It was silence on the other end of the phone. And he said, Simeon, I want you to repeat this story because this is proof that the feds know about this and they're not in control of it and they're trying to contain it. And again, Steve, I can't determine the veracity of all these witnesses' stories. Even to me, it sounds fantastic, but there's a lot of people with stories like this. Bud Hopkins, the New York City investigator, did a lot of research into this, of missing time and so forth. Is this
I'll give
another
you
component to the story that
I
is
give you
fantastic? Okay.
another thing to think about. So what have we seen in public culture over the past 10 years as well? Rise of where we come from. Where do you come from? What are your roots? You know what? We're going to make it so you could give us a blood sample and we're going to tell you where you're from. And how many times have you heard that people get the report back and say they were crazy, they were wrong, none of my relatives come from there? Well, maybe that's not what they're doing. Maybe they're out there looking to see how much alien DNA is spread through our culture, and we don't even know.
It's another Spielberg movie yet to come out.
Absolutely. They're all in here. I just got to let them out. I mean, uh, think about that to the extent. I mean, it's unbelievable to think that aliens have may been here and been living here right under our noses, if there are noses or someone else's.
Well,
But
Steve, I remember seeing a photograph in New Scientist magazine, and they had been doing this placental analysis of a woman to determine
oh
the health of the
god,
fetus, and they said, "We can't explain what this is." It was a nerve cell embedded with a integrated circuit chip that had been taken from the blood sample. The nerve
right?
cell, we're not
So what they do is they go into the embryonic fluid, they take out a blood cell with a long needle, and then they examine it to make sure the children's healthy.
exactly. And in this sample, and this is New Scientist magazine. I wish I had taken a photo, but this is before cell phones. I think this is from early 90s or something. It was a picture of what we would call an integrated circuit chip, somehow connected to a nerve cell.
How could that be?
Right. So what is it? And I'm just saying, what kind of evidence is out there for something like this? I think we could see a rationale why this information will be suppressed for a while. It's just beyond our almost capacity to have an intelligent conversation about. We don't want people flipping out and going, reacting with terror or whatever the reaction is. But all I can say is I've spoken to a lot of people who believe they've had something to do with this program. Under hypnosis, they give the same story. It wasn't only Bud Hopkins, but other researchers have looked into this. And I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know if it's literally true. Is this
So
another aspect of the story? Genetic manipulation,
so
testing?
let me tell you another story. So I'm a 9/11 victim, right? So, I was Sloan Kettering, I had kidney cancer, and I'm under monitor, whatever. These big shot doctors come to me one day when I'm there and say, listen, we're doing genetic testing on everybody that was down there. We're trying to get all the people, but you need to sign off big time, all these papers. And I'm like, listen, I told you already, I'm in. I'm here to help you. My health, if you're trying to figure out, and I asked them this question, if why I'm still alive and others are dead, I'm in. Right? So then they say to me, we want you to be aware that there may be some day in the future that either the law, health, or something where you may be scrutinized by your genetic code against others. And I said, what are you talking about? They said, well, what? I said, give me an example. They said, well, you may not be able to get health insurance because based on your genetic code. I was like, dude, I'm not going to make it long enough for you guys to figure that crap out. So I signed. So years later, after I did that, they have, plus I authorized them to hold all the cells they took from my body during surgery. So they're always doing these DNA comparisons. Now, how would I change? Your DNA is your DNA. It doesn't change. But anyway, it can mutate from exposed to environment, and that's how you get cancer, you know? So at least that's what they tell you. So I wonder if that's another search for whatever they need to know. You know, is this how are they using my DNA? Listen, I'm 67 years old. By the time they figure out how to read the DNA like that, I'll be long gone. But there are others collecting this DNA, collecting this research. What are they doing with it? Who knows?
Right. I didn't know
You
about
know,
that.
this I think this part of the show is going to be a separate show from
You
where
know,
we
it either
started.
I Steve, I think we've identified two solid reasons why there could be secrecy around the subject. The third obvious reason would be some sort of criminality involved in the cover up. People who are in that don't want to go to jail. They broke the law. We all get that. But these other two aspects of it are parts that could be so shocking to people, it could upset the fabric of society to the point where it wouldn't be functional. And I think that would be reasons we could understand, even if we don't agree one way or another, why authorities that knew about this, some genetic manipulation, genetic interaction, and other aspects of this, that it would frighten people to the extent that they would, lose it. So these are potential reasons why we have to proceed cautiously. But Steve, I think we can do it. We have dealt with very difficult subjects in the past. We're still here as a country and as a human race, and we can deal with it. It maybe it won't be easy, but we have so many mechanisms to talk about this. Look, we're doing it right now. And there's so many
Right.
other podcasts to talk about it, and we can bring people on to call in, and slowly people can process the fact that we're not alone. I don't know completely what the motivations are of these visitors. If they are visitors, we don't even know this could be their planet. Maybe we're the visitors. We don't know the full story here, but I think if we take it slowly and carefully, as you're used to being associated with, the law, we can deal with it one step at a time so that it turns into something that we can build upon rather than running away and, war of the worlds, panic, and all that.
No, we need facts.
We need
I
facts.
mean,
What? That's
we
what we
know
need.
facts. We need
We
to,
need the facts.
what
I totally
we
agree.
have this. What does it mean? You know, what does it mean? We have these sightings. What does it mean? We
Steve,
have, and
exactly.
we
Exactly.
have these stories about being abducted. I mean, how could there be so many stories? People have gotten lie detectors, questioned, four people separated telling the same story. Come on, and they tell you mass hysteria, mass.
Right, right. That it
Come
doesn't.
on.
No, exactly right. Steve, I even got to talk with Dr. Roger Lear over the years. He did the implant removals. I think he did 30 or 40 implants. I think there's a movie about him called Patient 17 that
I don't know this
Jeremy
story.
Corbell put together. Yeah, we saw the analysis of these implants by Dr. Roger Lear over and over again, and they were made of materials that were not easy to identify. There was some magnetic aspect of them, which was really strange, and some of them seemed electronically active. And none of these people had any recollection of how that could have gotten into their body. They were all discovered accidentally during routine X-rays, where the doctor would say, "When did you have surgery?" Right over there, and they would say, "I never did." And there's no visible wound on the surface. There's no surface scarring, and somehow the body didn't reject this little, you know, a tiny grain of salt sized device, but it's in there and they can remove it. And what are those? So, my reference point, like what you're saying, is the facts. I was on the Edgemont High School debate team for 4 years. I was the co-captain. I'm used to just dealing with evidence, and it's not enough of a retort against an assertion that it just sounds funny. You got to have
Right.
real evidence. If you have
Absolutely.
that many people saying it's happening to them, what is really going on there. And I think what makes me suspicious about all this effort to debunk UFOs and make it seem like some sort of conspiracy theory or just have a prosaic explanation is the sheer number of witnesses. And now, as we're seeing, the sheer number of videos and film and sensor system data that says there's something anomalous out there that we haven't been able to explain for decades. And that type of subject needs facts. It needs facts, and we're not getting them right now. We're not getting them.
So, what I thought, going back to Disclosure Day, the movie, what I thought was interesting, if you haven't seen it, cover your ears, is interesting how they made one of the main characters a former nun.
Yeah,
And
right,
not that she fell from grace, she
right.
just lost her calling, which happens to people. We know they go
Right.
out, they get married, they have families, those things. And I know lots of them that were lawyers because they were so well educated. And when she goes back to the Reverend Mother, she asks them, if I believe in aliens, does that mean that the God I believe in doesn't exist or something to that effect? And the Reverend Mother says, to tell everybody from the right it's okay, says, no, God is everyone's God, whether they're aliens or whether they're not. It's a supreme being.
Well, Steve, I found that moment in the movie very interesting. And you know that's actually based on fact?
No.
Yes, do you remember Signor Balducci, the Vatican spokesman?
Yes.
He was asked that exact same question. I almost, while watching the movie, I don't want to ruin it for anyone. We won't say anything more about this specific line. I thought, wow, this sounds like Signor Balducci talking, that was his response. He said, "Here at the Vatican, we've known about this for a long time, and we believe that our God wouldn't only create humans. God is so omnipotent that our God would create many species of life. It's already something we accept here." This was big news about 20 years ago because it meant you know, from people from that version of Christianity would find that acceptable.
Hmm.
That Catholicism doesn't have a problem with the idea of UFOs. That's what Balducci was telling us. And that was a big deal when he came out and said this. I believe it was around 2000 or 2005 or so, if I remember correctly. And what she says in the movie, those lines I mean, again, I thought someone did their research in this movie. It sounded a lot like Signor Balducci's response when he was
Right.
interviewed. I forget who the interviewer was, right? That this is something
Yeah.
that doesn't undermine Catholicism or Christianity. And that's a big deal for a lot of people because the counter argument has always been this is going to cause religious upheaval. It's the dialogue in the film really counters a lot of real world conversations that people have been having over the years. Would this undermine religion or would it do it in a way that people would lose their faith? What's going to replace the faith? And Balducci said, hogwash, it doesn't change really anything for us. We've known about this. And of course, there's always been these rumors that the Vatican has a UFO library, which I have heard accounts of people visiting, which is supposedly, Steve, going back to your discussion a few minutes ago,
So funny.
what
That was my next question, T, because I know you did. Go ahead.
the library goes back to your question. I mean, people said it's the most extensive UFO library on the planet is the Vatican UFO library, going back hundreds of years.
Can only imagine what's in that damn how vast it is down there. I mean, you see the recants of it in one of those movies by David, when they go in the archives to go back and look at things, and you see these vast archives of writings from philosophers
Well,
back
it's
to
this is the irony of it, Steve. It was who was it? Was it the Jesuits that were so hostile to Giordano Bruno, Copernicus, Galileo, right?
Galileo.
But at the same time, while in Arizona, I went to visit a Vatican telescope that is owned by the Vatican on Vatican property on the top of Mount Graham. about 2 hours from Tucson. I had heard about this telescope and I wanted to see it for myself. And there you drive up this huge mountain, Steve. It's like at 10,000 feet rising up from the desert. And I drove up and you get to a gate and it said Vatican Observatory on the gate, Mount Graham. So maybe there are people that know even more about this than our own government who have been researching this for a long time, and maybe they have given their apologies now to Copernicus, Galileo, and Bruno, if I'm not mistaken, right? There was a
Right.
official papal apology. Wasn't it right about 10 years ago or so? They said
I
it better late than never, that because they have their own telescopes and they see things and do their own research. It'd be another excellent movie, wouldn't it, of what they really know about this versus what we know about it. But times change and they are scientifically based too in their own way. And they may know more about this than the rest of us. They may
yeah,
have.
I'm reading a statement here. This is so John Paul II has famously stated that beings from the other world would still be the children of God, while former Vatican chief astronomer Jose Funes noted that, says ET, could could theoretically exist without having the history of original sin, because they didn't have. I mean, that's how much they thought about it. They didn't have Adam and Eve with the apple.
So there's a
Interesting.
spin on it. And see, you see how we could evolve into this with this type of disclosure process could really work because you already have people thinking about the consequences and a way to interpret it for their followers, right? So, excuse me.
I agree. That's right.
So I say it's time to move ahead, just like the Vatican is already ahead on this one. Let's be honest about it. They thought this out a couple decades ago. And
Well, it's good to have a supreme leader because they do, and nobody else tells them what to do, which we don't have. Which the rest of the world
yeah,
doesn't
they've got some
necessarily have.
leadership, and that's what Steve, I think that's a good way to sum it up for today. What we need here is leadership. I
I
love
agree.
going to all these conferences over the years, but these are self-sustained organizations that barely make it from year to year, just on the funding from people that come to pay for it. And each of them, we got to meet the person that, holds this conference. One at the speaker first night, speakers get together and have an event. And we got to meet the person that sponsored this event. I remember when I was at the Citizen hearing in 2013 in DC at the National Press Club. Now that was sponsored by Paradigm Research Group, but there was some wealthy Canadian timber baron that had put up the money
Right.
to have a week. You imagine to bring all those witnesses in from other countries and to hold the event there and to create the videos, the whole thing. There was some, I forget this person's name. So it's people have moved forward on Lawrence Rockefeller. Let's just bring in one more. Is he a New Yorker too? I mean, it was at Picantico Hills. They had that
Yeah.
conference when they invited it the Rockefeller Estate and that conference center, which I'm sure you've been by. Beautiful area to walk around. My mom loved those areas. My dad too. By the Union Church, right down the road is where one of the first UFO conferences was held. You know, in recent memory by Lawrence Rockefeller and Jacques Vallée was there. You can see the photo. Hal Puthoff, all these other researchers at the time in '96. I think that's when it was, if I'm not mistaken. So the Picantico Hills Conference was sponsored. It's been very wealthy people that have sponsored this research, and they've all wanted to move the ball down the field. They realize there could be a lot of benefits to our society, not just technologically, like let's figure out how their energy systems work. I'm not saying that's not important. Propulsion, yes, that's another reason that it's sensitive, anti-gravity propulsion. But just on a cultural, historical level, can we get some intelligent discussion? Can we get some facts here? That's what we're talking about. And they hold these conferences, and we're all coming together to get the facts. Well, I say it's time for some leadership here. We need to have some leadership, just like the Vatican has the Pope. We need some leadership on the subject that people can agree this is someone we can accept, or some organization that's telling us the truth. We've had MUFON. I'm a MUFON member. MUFON's great, but again, it's sort of a self-funded organization that the government has used from time to time to get witness accounts from. But I think we spend enough money on other programs that this would be a very good return on the dollar to start investing. We had one more thing, Steve. We did have Avi Loeb come forward 2 nights ago and say that there's a government UAP scientific advisory board that's being formed. I don't think we've been able to find evidence, I could be wrong, that this is true, but he came forward with a video on social media saying he was been asked to head this thing. So I say we just move resources into the public discussion of the subject to get the facts. I don't think anyone can disagree that it wouldn't hurt to get the facts. And we can move
Yeah,
on.
I agree. That's really where we're at. We want to know more about what people know.
What do we know? Let's bring it
And
out on the table. No one wants to release sensitive classified information to adversaries of the United States to help their military weapons. I get it. But you can sanitize all of that out of the data, just like they're doing with these drops of UFO videos. You black out the particular sensor system. Those sensor systems show you how accurate those cameras are. They don't want to give that. I've talked to people in the military. They don't want to give away how far the
understood.
radars can pick. We get that. You could black that part out, but you could release the information and stop calling us a bunch of kooks, okay? And saying
Agree.
it's weather balloons and flocks of geese and ice crystals. I love that one. Ice crystals on the windshield. And the best one is it's neurological stress from the pilots. Give me
How
a
about
break.
so what do you see in the director's cut of Close Encounters, right? You get the whole thing in the tower where they're watching the planes and they see the UFO, right? And they're talking about it, just went past me, blah blah blah. And then the tower guy says, "Do you want to report a, an object, an unexplained, unidentified object?" And you hear the guy pause, and he goes, "No, I don't really want to report one of those." Then he goes, "Well, what about you? You gonna report it?" He goes, "No, I don't want to report one of those either."
And that's what
And
happens.
and it moved on from there. But
That's
you
what
know,
happens, Steve. It's actually literally, I've talked to pilots and so forth. It's in my Black Swan Ghost book, these pilot accounts. They talk amongst themselves. They decide maybe we shouldn't. This is literally the conversation they have. And if you say too much, there are going to be guys waiting there on the tarmac in black suits when you get down, and they're going to say, "Can we have your camera, please, sir?" And you never get the camera back with the film or whatever. You know, uh, there
the
was
Men in
that case.
Black.
me- Remember in the Chicago airport, 2008 United terminal, there's an object seen hovering over the terminal. Big.
I do remember that. Yeah,
It punches a hole in the cloud as it moves up. There were like 30 witnesses from United Airlines, including baggage handlers, pilots, I believe, maybe tower traffic. I mean, they're asking each other what's going on over there over terminal so and so. And remember the response from United Airlines? They send
no,
out
I
a
don't.
memo. They send a memo to all the employees of United. You will not talk about this. So that's what has to end. That's what we need to talk about it. We need to get the facts. We're not dummies here. We didn't get to be the country we are by just saying, don't talk about it. We need to get the facts or we can't make decisions. We can't create public policy and we can't be intelligent human beings. And we're going to go back, Steve, from being able to do multiplication and division into just doing addition and subtraction if we don't have a public discussion on this topic. That's all it comes down to. So what do you want? Do you want to go back just to go to kindergarten? Or do you want to move forward to the next level? I mean, I know how I feel about it, but everyone has to make their own decision about it. That's where we can use some leadership about it.
Right.
And that's what Congress could be doing if they really want to do something about it instead of just getting release of these videos. How about showing us some pieces of something? Because I've talked to people who've handled the pieces. how about getting some of those pieces and getting some of those people that I know to sit down in front of Congress and say, without giving any specific information away that could be harmful, what is this? And
Hmm.
can we see it under an electron microscope or something? Can we get some facts about these materials? Because I know these materials exist. It can't just be videos, it has to be some material evidence at some point, and that's where this has to go. And again, the chips are gonna fall where they will in Washington, DC. That's what we pay these people for. It's not just to collect their salaries and be nice to each other, right? We want some real
Uh,
information here.
I don't think they are nice to each other. So it would be interesting if, since we can't get the right and the left, for lack of a better explanation, to work together, that a topic like this could be something that brings us all together after all that. And I think Simeon is a really good place to leave it.
I agree, Steve, and that's for another time. And again, that's what the movie was about, the Disclosure Day. They had
Right.
that very short. It's very short at the end, but that's the idea. Is
That's the
this
idea.
maybe Reagan was right? Maybe Ronald Reagan, when he said, "If I had to think about an issue that brings us all together, we realize we have a lot more in common than different." Maybe that would end wars overnight. Would be some statement
Maybe.
from our president, and I can see him doing it. He could do it. He
Well,
comes to the mic or Steve issues an executive order saying, "I'm granting amnesty to all witnesses to this program to testify." I'm invalidating all their NDAs. They can testify in front of Congress. He's done this type of thing before. We're invalidating the NDAs. It's executive order. I want all witnesses to not just disclosure.videos. I want all the witnesses who've seen something to contact Congress. We're going to have a process and they can testify over the next 10 years about what they saw. How about that? All right, we'll leave it at that, Steve. Thank you.
we'll leave it that. It just, for everyone, I don't necessarily believe the things I was talking about. I was just, food for thought
Speculation,
to
Steve.
bring on conversation and whatever. But there it is. There you have it. History Agenda. This is probably a two-part episode, and I thank Simeon
Thank you, Steve.
for coming on again. I still have people contact me regarding our episode on remote viewing, and I was so sick that day. We were all here doing it live at a bad camera, bad
You remember that?
lighting, bad
I
everything.
remember that. Yeah.
People watch that still and listen to it still.
Yeah.
And also we did a great episode on Bigfoot, and I thought that, and I still get a lot of feedback from that. So I thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to have you
Thanks,
on,
Steve.
and everyone, thank you for
Thanks for watching,
listening,
audience. Yep.
and everyone be there. So thanks again. Speak soon.